Unit 2, B1, major and minor political parties. Please make sure to add 3 pieces of information to each slide. So a political party is actually just a formal organization of people who are trying to control the government. These are not outside influences. These are people who are trying to actively participate in government. Different systems throughout the world have different basically numbers of parties. The first one is one party. That's where the party is the government. You don't have options of other parties. Political power is gained through the rise in the political party as opposed to elections. The Communist Party and other dictatorships often are this way. That's why you'll hear it referenced in like China, where new party leadership is taking over as opposed to an election. Another kind is two-party. This is rare. There's only about 15 countries that have a two-party system. The United States is one of them. There may be other parties in this, in each one of these systems. Like in the United States, there's other parties, but only 2 of them have real legitimacy, real shots at winning the elections. Then the most popular one, the most often occurring, is the multi-party. Parliamentary governments, basically people go to the polls, they vote, and if 10% of the people vote for Socialist Party, that means that Socialist Party gets 10% of the seats in the parliament. It's called proportional representation. This often creates what's called coalitions, where 2 different parties will join forces temporarily to gain more power. So roles of party. This is important. This is important. This will be on the exam. These are the things that political parties actually do, like what purpose that they serve. The first thing is that they recruit people, they recruit politicians, and then they label politicians as well. So, for example, if you went to the polls for president and there's 100 different presidents, it'd be very difficult to figure it out. Political parties reduce the number of possibilities because each political party only chooses one. When you see in the United States, when you see a D or an R next to the candidate's name, you know that they belong to the Republican or Democratic Party, and there's some certain assumptions that you can make about them, regardless of if you actually hear what they believe. So that makes it easier to vote sometimes for elections where you don't know what's going on. Like you go to the polls and it's asking about Lynn County Supervisor. The next one is acting as watchdogs. This is basically the minority party complaining when the majority party does anything. Or sometimes the majority party acts as a watchdog as well. This is criticizing the politicians. This is criticizing the politicians of the other party. Dispensing information. A platform's a document that each political party sort of puts out there that says these are our official belief about these particular issues. So a platform is something that most of the politicians within the party follow generally. Not every single one does word for word, that's for sure. Also, the political parties are involved in the campaigning for the candidates within their party. They raise funds, distribute funds, help out with ads and strategies. Also, the political party is actively involved in criticizing opponents' ideas. Oftentimes, members of the political party who are not elected officials, but members of the party or people that work for the party will go on the news and make some sort of statement about the opposing party or opposing candidates. The goal, obviously, is to run the government. The political party helps making appointments. When the president is looking for cabinet positions or other lower positions, the political party can give suggestions. They often, political party meets with the Congress, the federal or state, to uphold basic platform goals, to remind them, what dedications that they've made. It's free to be a member of a political party in the U.S. You can be independent if you want, This is different in some other countries where you have to pay to be a part of the party, or there's pretty heavy recruitment procedures. In the United States, we really don't recruit that hard. We don't. The political parties don't, force you to go vote. So it's membership is pretty informal. You can change it just by going to when you register for voting. You could go in and change it from Republican to Democrat to Independent. Typically, there's a national chairman and national committee of Republicans and the Democrats. The national chairman's the top dog, and typically is a big public relations person. Goes on the media and makes statements. The real power, however, is in the membership. It's called grassroots. For example, in the Republican Party, there's been significant movement lately. It's an interest group known as the Tea Party. Now, those are Republicans generally, and what they're doing is changing and from the ground up. That means the people, not the leadership, made decisions based on they wanted less taxes, basically, and so the Republican Party has been changing since 2009, has been changing pretty rapidly towards that direction. There are also, the Iowa Republicans, there are the Lynn County Republicans, there are the Iowa Democrats and Lynn County Democrats. So this is where the majority of the power lies, if you add them all up together. Democrats and Republicans are the modern political parties. We've had Whigs and Republican Democrats and all sorts of different political parties at the beginning of the United States, but pretty solidly since the 1860s there's been just the two big boys, Democrats and Republicans. We have winner-take-all elections. We do not have proportional representation. Basically, because of winner-take-all elections, in order to win a seat, you have to win the majority somewhere. So if you have 10% of people across the country that believe in the Socialist Party, but there's nowhere that they have a majority, it's sort of too bad. They won't get a seat. So parliamentary governments do proportional voting in the United States. And plus the United States government is organized for two-party system. Seats in the House and other activities. Two parties overlap in the United States. Other countries don't. Democrats and Republicans in the United States have a lot of similar views, though it doesn't seem like it at times, but they do overlap. So this should look awful familiar. This is almost the exact same list as the liberals and conservatives. In modern times, in the last decade or so, Democrats have been almost universally now liberal, and Republicans almost universally conservative or moderate, and Democrats liberal or moderate. It didn't always used to be that way. There was conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans. Jim Leach, and actually a representative member for Iowa for years and years, was not quite a liberal Republican, but he was heavily moderate. Blue-collar workers means people who work, with their hands, physical laborers, etc. White-collar means people who can go to work with a white shirt on and not get it dirty. All right. Now in the United States, like we talked about, there's not just two parties, but only two parties have power, legitimate power. But there have been minor parties in the history that make a difference, and there are minor parties in existence today. So let's talk about the different kinds. The first one's an ideological party. This is a political party that wants to change the way the United States operates generally. So this is they have pretty high, pretty lofty goals. Socialist, communist, libertarian, they're more extreme ones. Socialists and communists want more of the gift economy, or the socialist economy, and libertarian wants the exact opposite, which is where the United States government basically does not interfere with people's social life or the economic. Next is single issue parties. these are parties that really only exist because of a particular issue. It's pretty temporary, typically. The Free Soil Party in the 1840s and 1850s, this was before the Civil War. They're trying to, as new states entered the Union, they tried to push for them to be non-slave states, trying to limit the spread of slavery. The States' Right Party was actually conservative Democrats after World War II that were upset with the trend of the national government imposing its will on them, which gave them the idea to call it the States' Right Party. This mostly had to do with civil rights because states didn't feel like the federal government should be pushing that on them. This was mostly southern states. Economic Protest Party. These are the ones that are basically get very upset about economics and try to change something dramatically. Pictures on the right are pictures of William Jennings Bryan, who was the presidential candidate for the Populist Party and Democratic Party in 1896. Now he lost, but they wanted things in that particular case, like they tried to create inflation overnight using bimetallism. Inflation would help people who are in debt, so like farmers, because then they would get extra money for their crops. They would get more dollars for their crops, but their loans would still be the same amount. So it would thus, overnight inflation basically would, in effect, reduce the amount of debt that you have. Of course, you can guess who didn't like that. It was the wealthy people who have lots of money, and they didn't want the value of their money to go down, and the banks who had loaned those people that money. Probably the most powerful ones are splinter parties. These are parties that splinter off of the major parties and usually have to do with just a strong leader. Progressive Party in 1912 was when Teddy Roosevelt split off of the Republican Party, because he didn't like the way that William Howard Taft had been sort of running things since Teddy had got out of office. So he ran for the election in 1912, and then in 1982, Ross Perot split off from the Republican Party as more of a sort of almost an economic protest party as well, where he wanted to reduce the amount of tax on people's lives, and he felt like George H.W. Bush was not upholding promises. Okay, so there's basically three roles that minor parties can play. It's cut off a little bit, but in the 1992 election and in the 1912 election, those splinter parties ended up being spoilers. They actually took a proportion of the vote from their major party, right? So Wilson won in 1992 because of Teddy Roosevelt running, and Bill Clinton ended up winning because Perot was taking votes from George H.W. Bush. Minor parties are usually loud, obnoxious, and criticizing the major parties about, maybe the lack of representation of a particular type of people. So minor parties sometimes can do that and actually make the big parties change what they do. These are also parties that can propose programs that aren't really acceptable, but because they do that, it gets the idea out into the public, and eventually, that takes hold. An example is the progressive movement, or is a progressive income tax, which means the higher wealth that you have, the higher percentage of tax that the government takes, and that is now now is law in this country. Women's suffrage, again, was a pretty controversial idea at one time, and now it is our law. Old age pensions, Social Security was a pretty radical idea that was proposed by some minor parties, and well, now we have it.